Welcome to the Ghost Story Grandma channel. Today, Grandma will bring you a mysterious and eerie tale. Get ready for it. Ghost Story. Scary, true, dead-of-night horror stories. The car rolled into the town of Coldbrook just as the sun dipped below the barren treetops. The road leading in was narrow, flanked by old wooden houses with only a few dim lights flickering behind thick curtains. Everything here had an eerie stillness, as if the entire town was holding its breath. Ryan turned off the engine. Mia, sitting in the passenger seat, checked her phone for signal, but found only a weak bar. In the back, Laura and Zach silently took in their surroundings. "I don't like this place," Laura murmured, her fingers tightening around the fabric of her shirt. "Weird. It's like the whole town is abandoned," Zach muttered, peering out the window. "Feels like everyone's hiding inside." Ryan grabbed his backpack and opened the car door. "We're only here for a few days. We find out what we need, then we leave." His voice was firm, but there was a hint of tension beneath it. They stepped into a small roadside diner, the only place with its lights still on. A middle-aged woman stood behind the counter, her expression flickering with surprise as she saw them. "You're not from around here," she said, her voice raspy. "We're students working on a research project," Mia replied. "We've heard about the strange disappearances in this town." The woman froze for a moment, then lowered her gaze, wiping the counter with an old cloth. "There's nothing to know. Best you kids leave before night falls." Zach frowned. "But..." The door at the back of the diner suddenly creaked open. An elderly woman stepped in, small and frail, her long silver hair cascading over her shoulders. Her deep-set eyes seemed to pierce right through them. She took a seat near the counter, her voice soft yet unwavering. "They're not going anywhere. The kids want the truth." The air inside the diner grew thick. "Who are you?" Ryan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The old woman met his gaze. "I'm the only one left who remembers, and if you truly want to know, then listen carefully." She paused, her frail hands gripping the arms of the chair. 2:33 a.m. Do not go outside at that time." A cold draft slipped through the window cracks. No one spoke, but deep down they all knew it was already too late to turn back. Outside, the night had fully settled over the town. The sparse streetlights cast a dim, yellowish glow, barely cutting through the darkness. Ryan checked his watch. 11:45 p.m. They decided to return to the motel and continue their investigation the next day. But Laura couldn't stop thinking about the old woman's warning. "Why 2:33? She murmured as she stepped into the room. Mia set her backpack down on the bed. Maybe that's when the disappearances happened. Ryan checked the camera. Zach plugged his headphones into the laptop, rewinding the diner recording. His brow furrowed when he noticed a section of distorted audio. "Wait." Zach slowed the playback. Between the gaps in their conversation, a whisper emerged. It wasn't the old woman's voice. It wasn't anyone in the room at the time. "Leave now." The voice was faint, warped, as if echoing from somewhere far away. Mia shivered. "Who said that?" Ryan reviewed the footage again. Nothing seemed unusual except for a flickering glitch when the old woman mentioned 2:33 a.m. "Let's check it out," Zach said, standing up. "Right now?" Laura stared at him. Ryan nodded. "We can't just sit here guessing." Grabbing their flashlights, they left the motel. The town was eerily silent. Every door was shut tight. As they crossed the central square, a black cat darted from an alley. Zach instinctively aimed his light at it, his beam landing on an old, rusted sign. "Road closed after midnight." The red paint had faded with time. Mia glanced around. Who even puts up a sign like this? Ryan stepped closer, running a hand over the weathered wood. A crumpled note was tacked below, scrawled in shaky handwriting. "If you hear knocking at 2:33, don't open the door." No one spoke. A light breeze drifted through, carrying the strange scent of damp earth. Zach turned on his camera. "Let's go a little further." They moved toward the woods. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Their flashlights illuminated towering trees, their footsteps the only sound in the silence. Suddenly, Mia stopped. "Do you hear that?" They listened. At first, only stillness. Then, a sound. Faint, a whisper, coming from somewhere deep within the forest. No one wanted to go any farther. Ryan checked his watch. 2:31 a.m. The wind had died down. No one spoke. Ryan glanced at his watch. 2:32 a.m. Mia's breathing was unsteady. Zach gripped his flashlight tightly, its beam cutting through the darkness ahead. The tree canopy cast heavy shadows, obscuring the path. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth. The whispers persisted, sometimes close, sometimes distant. They didn't come from a single direction. It was as if they echoed from the very night itself. Laura swallowed hard, clutching her jacket. Ryan shook his head slightly. They couldn't just stand there. He gestured for them to leave. Zach took a slow step backward. Mia exhaled sharply, trying to steady herself. Then, another sound broke the silence. Knock, knock, knock. 3 steady knocks. No one moved. Mia gripped Ryan's wrist. Zach stepped back again, scanning the trees for the source. Laura glanced at her watch. 2:33. Knock, knock, knock. The sound wasn't loud, but each knock landed heavily in the silence. Ryan swung his flashlight forward. The beam fell upon a small wooden cabin, almost swallowed by the trees. Its front door trembled slightly, as if someone stood outside. Zach shook his head. Mia took a step back. Laura whispered, her voice unsteady. No one moved toward the cabin, but the knocking continued. Knock, knock, knock. Then it stopped. A suffocating silence settled over them. Ryan stood frozen, feeling a chill creep down his spine. Zach quickly signaled to turn back. No one argued. They turned and walked swiftly out of the forest. The darkness behind them stretched endlessly. No wind, no rustling leaves. Only their footsteps crunching on the dirt path. Until a faint sigh drifted right next to Mia's ear. She flinched, spinning around. Nothing. Ryan grabbed her arm, pulling her forward. Their group sprinted toward the town square, hearts pounding. Only when the streetlights came into view did they stop. No one spoke. Zach crouched, flipping open his laptop to check the recording. The screen flickered slightly. For a brief moment, static blurred the footage as they left the forest. And in that brief moment, right at the cabin door, a faint, shadowy figure. Rewinding the audio, Zach played back the last few seconds. Something had been picked up on the mic. Not a whisper this time. A voice, warped, distant. Mia stared at the screen, her body turning cold. The voice played again. "Why didn't you open the door?" Zach rewound the recording again and again. The faint voice echoed through the speakers. No one knew where it had come from. Mia stepped back, then eyes locked on the screen. Ryan clenched his fists, his face tense. Laura spoke, her voice dry. Ryan turned to Zach. Zach typed slowly, adjusting the audio frequencies. The waveform appeared, broken, distorted, but the words remained clear. "Why didn't you open the door?" A long silence followed. The 4 of them exchanged glances. The room felt colder. Mia crossed her arms, leaning against the wall. Ryan stood up. Zach checked his watch. 2:57 a.m. Outside the window, the street remained deserted. The flickering streetlights blinked erratically. Mia glanced at her phone. No signal. Laura left her seat, stepping into the hallway. Ryan followed. The apartment was silent. No sounds except their own breathing. Zach stared at his laptop, replaying the recording one last time. A faint breath came through the speakers. Not from any of them. The air went still. Mia lifted her phone, opening her contacts. The signal wavered. Zach snapped his laptop shut. Laura returned, her face pale. The front door was open. None of them remembered opening it. A light breeze drifted in, carrying a damp, musty scent from somewhere unseen. Ryan stepped forward, slowly pulling the door shut. It slammed closed. At that exact moment, Mia's phone vibrated. The screen lit up. A new message. Just one sentence. "The door is open." Mia tightened her grip on the phone. The screen remained lit, the lone message glowing against the dark background. "The door is open." Zach checked his watch. Still 2:57 a.m. Laura stepped back, pressing against the wall. Ryan scanned the room, his gaze sweeping every corner. No one spoke. Mia tried typing a reply. No signal. Zach unplugged his laptop. The screen went black, but just as he was about to close the lid, it turned back on. A chat window appeared. New message. "The door is still open." Ryan moved toward the front door, checking the lock. Everything seemed normal, but something felt wrong. Laura clutched her own arm, her breath unsteady. Zach tapped on his keyboard, trying to trace the source of the messages. No response. The system remained frozen. Mia looked back down at her phone. The message was gone, as if it had never existed. She scrolled through her old texts. Nothing. Ryan opened a kitchen drawer, pulling out a small knife. Laura frowned. Zach leaned forward, elbows on the table. The door was open, but no one knew where it led. Zach exhaled slowly, eyes shut for a brief moment. His hand remained on the keyboard. Mia clenched her phone, fingers absent-mindedly swiping across the blank screen. Ryan leaned against the kitchen counter, eyes fixed on the front door. Then came the knocking. 3 knocks. Short, sharp, decisive. Laura flinched. Zach's eyes snapped open. Ryan straightened. Mia didn't move. The knocking continued. 3 knocks. A precise 5-second pause in between. Ryan stepped forward, his gaze flicking to the gap beneath the door. No shadow, no movement. Zach pressed hard on the keyboard. The chat window disappeared, only to be replaced by a new line of text. A repeating sequence. Laura shivered. Mia placed her phone on the table. Ryan reached for the handle. The knocking stopped. Silence. The wind whistled through the window frame. Mia edged closer, staring at the lock. Ryan tightened his grip. The door was unlocked. He turned back. Zach stared at the screen. Laura bit her lip. Mia gave a small, hesitant nod. Ryan pushed the door open. No one was there. Cold air rushed in. The streetlights still glowed, casting their dim reflections onto the tiled floor. Laura took a step back. Zach remained seated. Mia looked down. A small slip of paper lay on the ground. A single sequence scrawled across it. Ryan picked it up. The paper felt damp. Mia shivered, her hands ice cold. Zach glanced back at his screen. The numbers were gone. Laura slipped away from the living room, heading down the hallway. Ryan clenched the note. Outside, the wind howled softly. Mia glanced at her watch. A second later, Ryan looked down at the slip of paper. The writing began to fade. The wind had stopped. Mia stepped back, heart pounding. Knock, knock, knock. The door creaked open. Darkness spilled in, swallowing everything. End.